Victor Hugo once said, "There is nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come." When we think about the course of human discovery, we realize that it's always been driven by ideas and innovation. Yet when we think of innovation, our mind immediately wanders to certain milestones: the wheel, the printing press, antibiotics, the steam engine, computers, the internet, smartphones. What we think of less, though, are the innovations that eventually drive massive leaps. Case in point, the barcode. When the barcode was invented in 1948, it didn't have the familiar rectangular format we now know. It had a circular format. It was designed to simplify the grocery checkout process. Yet even though it was a powerful idea, its time had not yet come. Additional innovations were needed: the invention of laser, a powerful light source, and the shrinking of computers would eventually bring us the grocery checkout counter in 1974. The journey of the barcode was not as smooth or as linear as we'd like to think, but that's rarely the case. And it's something that we're used to. When we sit down to watch a movie or binge watch the latest show, we're watching a hero follow the unbeaten path. In this case, the original Mark Hamill as the original Luke Skywalker in the original Star Wars. Now, even though we celebrate the unbeaten path in movies, we're more reluctant to do so or follow it in our day-to-day lives and follow it in how we pursue innovation. When we think about the difference between evolutionary change, small incremental improvements, and revolutionary change with an R, massive leaps that change lives and change industries, we realize that revolutionary change is almost always less structured. Yet we can bring structure even to the most revolutionary changes. As a child, in 1990, my family and I relocated back to my country of birth, Egypt, as a result of the first Gulf War. Now, the nature of those circumstances meant that the change was extremely unstructured. A few years later, my family and I would go through a much more revolutionary change. We'd immigrate to Canada. And even though that change was much more revolutionary than the first, it was more structured. We had taken the time to plan, to prepare, calculate the costs and benefits, and take the leap. Companies, venture capitalists, the government, the nonprofit sector, and social entrepreneurs are asking, how can I switch from incremental improvements to being part of the next big revolutionary leap? To answer this, it would be useful to look at how we process ideas. If we look at the progression of ideas, from conception to viability, we realize that there's filtering at every stage. Early on, we assess ideas to determine whether they are wanted by the target audience and whether they are financially viable. As we move on, we find out that some of those ideas are either too expensive or too complicated to implement. And as we move to testing, we find out that some of the assumptions we initially made turn out to be false. And sometimes we find out that we simply overestimated demand. The end result is we're left with a small fraction of the ideas that we initially started with. Now, this makes sense. From the perspective of companies and venture capitalists, there are finite resources. They know they can invest in one good idea in the midst of, say, 10 failed ideas while still making a profit. For governments in the nonprofit sector, this is reflected in grants, public spending, and donations. Yet ultimately, throughout society, we're filtering these ideas. But how do we make sure that we're not missing out on the next big thing? The answer to this lies in unstructuring some parts of the innovation process. And in this case, lies in increasing the number of inputs we're getting into the system. In this case, the number of ideas going through the system at the beginning. But is it possible to do so without wasting resources? And is it possible to do so while keeping the overall process structured? A hint to this may lie in circuits. Most circuits are linear. They are a sine wave that is symmetrical vertically. Now, there are also nonlinear signals. Those can sometimes be square signals. And in the case when they're also a wave like this, they deviate from the sine wave. And they're not symmetrical vertically. Now, circuit designers want to design linear systems. But there is a problem. The building block of electronics design, the transistor, is a nonlinear device. Which means that when we apply an input signal, we get a nonlinear output. Electronics designers have overcome this by something called the small signal approximation, which means that if you put in a small signal at the input, you get a linear signal at the output. But the problem is already clear. As soon as we increase the size of the signal at the input, the signal at the output becomes nonlinear. However, there is a class of circuits that is internally nonlinear, but can generate a linear signal at the output. In fact, those signals are linear at the input, nonlinear in the center, then become linear at the output. And this is done by going through a structured process at the beginning and at the end, which is converting the signal from a linear to nonlinear one, and then at the end, doing the reverse in a structured fashion. The end result is that in the center, where the signal is nonlinear, we can process a much larger range of signals. If we bring this into the way we process ideas and innovation, we can see that by unstructuring some parts of the process, we can increase the number of ideas we're bringing in. And this applies across the board. During my career, I've been a researcher, an academic, I've been a technology entrepreneur, a cultural entrepreneur, and I've been a consultant working with the public sector. In the technology industry, companies are now setting up incubators besides their R&D departments. And those incubators allow for many more ideas to come through. And the tolerance for failure in incubators is much larger. In the public sector, governments are experimenting with new ideas, and they're bringing in ideas from the private sector. And in the nonprofit sector, communities are experimenting with new ideas and re-exploring old ones, such as the arts, to address our contemporary social challenges. So how can we encourage this as a society? One of the things we need to do is invest more in innovation. If there's more money available for innovation, we can tolerate more failure, which means we can tolerate more ideas. Another way is to improve the efficiency of the later stages of the process, at the design, testing, and implementation. And what this results in is that eventually we can bring in also more ideas at the beginning. Another thing we can do is increase the number of spaces where we share ideas, and incubation spaces offer a great opportunity for this. Technology entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs are getting together, merging ideas, exploring new ways, and creating magic. And that is really where true magic lies. If we look at some of our greatest innovators in the contemporary world, such as Steve Jobs, they've dabbled in a wide range of fields, from computers to animation to music. And finally, how can we bring this to our day-to-day lives? Well, first thing, there's no such thing as a bad idea. Keep track of your ideas. As we saw with the barcode, one idea can be combined with seemingly unrelated ideas in the future to create something greater. Share your ideas. Whether you're speaking with an expert or whether you're speaking with friends, listen to the ideas of others and share yours. True magic may be lying just around the corner. And test your ideas. Find ways to test your ideas cheaply, early in the process, to find out whether they are viable or not, or whether they are wanted or not. And finally, embrace the innovator in you. Every one of us is an innovator by the nature of the unique journey we're taking and our own story. That idea that passes through your mind today may never cross anyone else's. Thank you.